Welcome to Red and April Off-Grid Home Build. In this video, we will be hand pouring some more concrete, putting up our first wall section, and Red finally gets around to building shelves and unpacking his shop.
The guest bathroom has had time to cure, and so we're starting to remove the insulation and the covering that we had over the top of that so that we can get ready to pour the next pad, or the next section of the pad. So we're kind of done with the bathrooms now, and we're ready to move into the central area of the house that's going to be, covered with concrete, and that's the kitchen, the dining, and the entryway area. And so I've got all that kind of framed off and ready to pour, and there's two sections. We're skipping one in the middle so that we can work on two sections at once. And so kind of the next thing is to get the layers down and get ready to pour those next sections. So here you can see we have those layers down, those two sections are ready to pour. We're just going to pour one per day. And my daughter decided to help out on this one, so she joined in to give us a hand. This was her first time doing concrete, and she took to it very well and was very helpful. It is bright and sunny outside, and so it's pretty warm at this time of day, but the evenings and nights have been getting really cold. And so our water has been freezing off on the pad, or at least the hose has been freezing off. And so we're having to wait until, 10 or even later in the morning for that to thaw out and get going. So this is kind of late morning, and we're getting going on the pad. So we all kind of got into a routine of who does what and kind of how to work together as a team, and it's working good. I'm kind of doing the mixing, and my daughter's working the cement in. Like I say, this is her first time, and she's doing really well. Just kind of working that down, trying to get the rocks down before it kind of starts to set. It's a slow process since I'm mixing each batch, by hand. This pour probably took over 20 mixes. This is a process that takes, a couple of hours at least to mix and pour all of the concrete before we can really start working it. But we've got it all mixed in here. It's all filled, and we're kind of starting to put in the last bucketfuls and kind of level it off and start to get ready to do the final screeding and see if we need to add anywhere, see if we have any low spots. Having 3 people working on this really helped everybody. The girls were able to, help me. They were filling my gravel buckets, so I didn't have to stop and fill those. So kind of took some of the strain off me doing the mixing, and then they kind of helped each other with, the leveling and the spreading. And so it was super nice. So 2 people can do it, but 3 certainly helped. And so really appreciate her joining in. And now they're just kind of working on the last bit, trying to get it low spots filled in so we can screed. And kind of screeding kind of tells you where your low spots are. You can really see it really clearly. And you can kind of move the concrete around to fill in those low spots and see if you need to mix any more. I could tell we needed just a little bit more here, so I just made another half batch and filled in the low spots, and then we re-screeded, and then that gets us, kind of ready to start working it with the bull float and then on to final finishing. It's been so cold and stuff that it takes a while to dry, so we actually usually go inside for lunch and take an hour or 2 off and then come back out. And by that time it's dried enough that we can actually do the very final finishing with the bull float and the trowel. Pouring concrete is interesting because there's times of brief, intense activity where it's kind of intense and stressful, and then you do a lot of waiting. And so here in the in-between time, I've started working on the first wall of the house. And so there's layers that you have to put down before you can actually put the wall onto the footer. And so those layers include several things, but I'm putting in a termite shield here. And I can explain kind of what that is in a later video, but you can see the layers. That metal strip is the termite shield. There's also layers of foam. And I'm just kind of getting things laid out and try to get the sill plate marked so that I can bolt the sill plate down to the footer. This next part I really enjoy. I just enjoy doing carpentry, and so moving on to the kind of carpenter part of this project is always fun for me. And so I'm starting to cut the boards for the walls. I'm cutting the studs to length here, and then I'll be working on the sill plate and the top rail, getting those all marked and ready to nail together. I decided, since it was just me and April working on the place, that I would put the wall up in 12-foot sections. And so here I have enough studs laid out to do a 12-foot section of wall. And so I just get them all up on my sawhorses, get them all measured and ready to cut, and then cut them all at once. It doesn't take very long. And if you do it this way, it all goes really fast. This darker board that I'm using here is treated lumber, and that's the sill plate. The sill plate has to be, or should be, treated lumber to protect against rot and termites and what have you. The first thing that I do to the sill plate is to drill the holes for the bolts that will be bolting it down to the footer. Once those holes are in place, I get it up and I accurately mark the location of each stud. And I do that for the top and the bottom, or the top rail and the sill plate. And I do those at once. Those boards will both be exactly 12 foot since I'm doing a 12-foot section. Once those are all accurately marked, I just put it on the ground and start laying it out as I'm doing here, just kind of getting them close to in place so that I can then go along with my nailer and quickly nail them together. And once you get going, it goes pretty fast. I do like to take a square and halfway square up the board to the sill plate so that I'm not nailing them in at the wrong angle to where it's fairly close. And then I kind of go along, make sure they're fairly square, and then I nail in the top rail, and then I have a section of wall that's ready to go up. I had measured the height of the footer and I realized that it's not perfectly level since we're going to pour. So anyway, I wanted to adapt before we actually put the wall on. So I built a shim here that's like a tapered shim out of treated lumber to put under there to kind of make up for the one corner being just a little low. And so that's what that was. And so here's kind of late in the day, but we wanted to get it up just for the satisfaction. So April's helping me and we're standing up the wall. You just kind of stand it up and set it down over the bolts that are in your footer. And then she kind of held it up and put with the level on it, got it level, while I drove in a stake that I could attach this beam that's at an angle from the ground up to the end of the wall. I put one of those on each end to keep it from tipping over, and we tried to get those pretty much perfectly level. And then I put in a board going sideways, kind of diagonally across all the studs, or several of the studs, to keep it from racking. It is pretty exciting to get our first section of wall up and secure and level. It's just very satisfying. So we got that one done, and then the next day we were ready to pour another section of the pad. And so this was a little bit smaller section. Me and my daughter got out a little bit earlier and got started on this one. It was a little bit warmer morning. And here we are just mixing away and trying to fill the pad and get it leveled close. I really like doing these pours in smaller sections. It's not ideal in that there will be seams there eventually, in our home, and that they may be covered by some kind of a treatment, but what it does allow us to do is just cut it up into manageable sections, because it's really physically tiring to do. And 2 or 3 hours of doing this is about all our bodies want. And so doing these smaller sections just allow us to cut this big, intimidating project up into manageable pieces that we're not too intimidated by, that we can do without totally wearing ourselves out. And I think it allows us to do a little bit better job too, and on each pour, and come out with a little bit better quality product, do a little bit better job finishing and completing each one. So it's working out well, and I'm glad we did it this way. This one is almost done. We're getting ready to do the finishing, doing those last little bits of pours here and there, looking for low spots, doing the screeding and trying to even it out. We did have a fair amount of water in this one. I may have mixed my concrete a little bit too wet. It sure seemed like there was a little bit of excess moisture in this, although we're not experts. You can see a lot coming off the side of the form there as we bring the screed across. But, overall it did seem to work out well. Well, during one of the more recent concrete pours, I managed to pull a muscle, and so I had to take it easy for a few days and move away from the concrete to kind of give my body a break from that, I guess. It was frustrating because I wanted to be working on the concrete, but I needed to take some time off, and so, but I wanted to be doing something, and so I decided I could work on my Connex, my shipping container. It's been really frustrating for the last few months because I haven't been able to find anything in there. I've had everything kind of piled up in boxes along the wall. I mean, I could get to everything, but I had to really dig through boxes, and it's been really frustrating. I'm used to having a really well-organized shop, and so this seemed like the perfect opportunity to build in some storage into my shipping container. So you saw the pegboards that I just put in. I like to hang up tools where I can see them, and so that was one of the things I wanted to do, is put in a 4x8 sheet of pegboard. So nice to get tools up on the wall where I could see them. And then I also wanted to do some shelves. And so I still had the shelving material from my last shop that I brought with me. Had some some of the metal brackets and what have you. And so I used those on one side, and the other shop I kind of started from scratch, which is what you see here. And figured out a good way to do this, for me at least, was to get a couple 2x4s kind of in the shallow part of the wall, and then use bolts, actually drill through the side of the shipping container and then bolt those 2x4s on, and then I could, screw into those 2x4s and make nice shelves and kind of build them in a normal fashion once I had that wood up where I could work with it. I really love putting up shelves. They're just so very satisfying. They hold a lot of stuff, and you're able to get stuff out where you can see it. Even if you're using boxes to kind of categorize the stuff, you can put it up there right on the box and just pull the box from the shelf. And so anyway, I can't believe I waited so long to do this. I've needed to do it for months, and so once I got into this project, I was just really loving it. So nice to get these shelves up and to actually do this organizing that I had needed to do for so long. So this was a whole lot of fun. So these shelves here are, I think these boards are, around 8 foot long, and they're like a 2x12, so they're really heavy duty. You can see here on the left where I've already got my full rack of shelves, basically from floor to ceiling, in this 9 foot tall shipping container, where I've got, I think, 5 or 6 shelves on that side. And that's where I used the metal brackets that I'd bought from my last place. But I kind of did the same thing on those, where I recessed a 2x4 into the wall, bolted the 2x4 to the side of the Connex, or the shipping container, and then mounted my racks onto those 2x4s.
So here's kind of our junk pile. We've got all the materials stacked here that have been used before. So Red comes over here to try to salvage some more of these materials. He's putting up shelves in his shop the last couple of days and trying to get that all organized. It's about noon. We have another cloudy day today. It's not a real heavy cloud cover, so that always helps. And then most days we get some kind of sun, even if it's cloudy for part of the day. So the solar's doing good. It's December 21st, so the darkest day of the year. We weren't sure if we'd be able to get through the winter without adding some more batteries, but we've been doing just fine.
I pretty well got my shelves in, and kind of one last thing I wanted to do is to build a rack to mount my clamps for. So I do a lot of carpentry work, and so you use a lot of clamps in carpentry. And so it's nice to have a rack that you hold all your clamps and just gets them up out of the way. They've been laying all over the shop, and it's been so frustrating. So basically I just got a couple 2x4s and made it to where I could clamp the clamp onto one of the 2x4s and mounted that there again with bolts through the side of the shipping container. And I'm not worried about those bolts leaking because it's on the side, and it's actually on the interior side of the shipping container. So finally got everything all done, and I'm able to start kind of organizing. This is so satisfying for me. I like organizing things, and I'm kind of reorganizing my tools and all my supplies and utilizing all that shelf space that I just built and getting things, everything where I know where it is. It's been, like say frustrating working out of this shipping container because I know what I have, but I don't know where to find it. And I'm not used to that. And so this is going to be so nice for everything to have a place. And so then I'll be able to remember where everything is and just come back in and find it immediately. The last little thing was to just kind of vacuum up. In these shipping containers, the floor is a heavily treated lumber. And so I like to vacuum up the dust instead of just blow it around because I don't like breathing it in. So I'm just vacuuming it up, cleaning it up, and getting ready to go here. Very satisfying. In the end, I ended up with a huge pile of empty boxes outside, shelves full of tools that I could see, and a whole lot more access to my workspace. So my bench tops and my equipment is much more accessible now, so I'm very happy. Well, we had bought 18 tons of gravel to use on our pad for the kind of underlayment and the concrete itself, and we actually used it all. We ran out, and so we needed a little bit more. Fortunately, my daughter and son-in-law, who live on the neighboring property, had some extra, and so they had said we could come get what we needed, so we made a run up there and loaded some onto the back of the trailer for this next concrete mix. The gravel we got from them is really small gravel. It's probably 1/2 inch or smaller, and the stuff that we were using previously was kind of 1 inch to 3/4 inch. So the 1/2 inch stuff will work fine, but it is totally different grit, and it was pretty interesting making concrete with the smaller gravel. It just had a totally different kind of texture and feel. But so here we are, just getting this next section ready. I had it a little bit too full of the gravel, so we're actually able to harvest some more gravel out of this. Got a little bit too much in here, but I'm lowering it a little bit to make sure we have enough room to get our 3 to 3.5 inch thick pad, and getting it all level and smooth and ready to start putting in the layers. I think I mentioned before, but we're doing the layers are housing wrap as the very first layer to kind of protect the next layer, which is the plastic as a vapor barrier. And so then the vapor barrier goes on next, and then we do the 1-inch foam board with the shiny side up to kind of reflect that heat back up into the house. We're hoping to use the floor as thermal mass that'll capture energy during the winter, during the cold months, as that sun shines directly through our windows, hits the floor, absorbs that heat, and then releases it through the day to warm the house. So that's the idea here. And then, of course, the cement that we're making here, we're reinforcing with the fiberglass fibers, and that's why you don't see any rebar. But the fiberglass fibers, I believe can be used in lieu of rebar, especially for just an interior pad. I'm also using an extra strong concrete mix here, so it should be have plenty of strength and structural integrity to work great, especially for an interior pad. It's not like we're going to be driving forklifts on it every day. Here we are just about getting this finished up. We're just about getting ready to screed. You can see that yellow thing kind of off to one side in the pad. That's one of the in-floor sockets. This is the first one that we've actually, kind of buried with the concrete. I believe the design calls for that to be like a 1/4 inch underneath the surface of the floor. And that actually worked out really well. You can see here where it's kind of being covered up as we screed. But then we come back, later on and find it. Fortunately, April remembered. I almost forgot about it, and that would have been bad. But April remembered it was there. We found it and pulled the top off here, and it worked out perfect. It was just about a 1/4 inch below the surface, which is just what the manufacturer called for. The yellow cap is just a cement protector, so that's to be pulled off when you're done making it, and so now it's ready to go.
Thank you so much for watching, and join us again next time. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe.